The desert stretched wide, endless as a prayer unanswered. Heat shimmered on the horizon where mountains rose like jagged teeth, and the wind carried grit sharp enough to peel the skin from a man's lips. On that dust-burnt trail, riders came and went. Outlaws, drifters, sheriffs, and dreamers. But this story wasn't just about men carving names in the dust. It was about her, Clara Hastings. The folks in Abilene whispered she was destined for spinsterhood. 26 and plain by town standards, though her eyes, clear as mountain lakes, gave her a beauty most men were too blind or too foolish to notice. Her father had been a preacher, long buried under prairie sod, and her mother eked out a living sewing for townsfolk too busy or too lazy to mend their own shirts. Clara worked by candlelight, fingers pricked and blistered, sewing seams that would outlast the men who wore them. She was tired of it. So when a folded paper from the Western Matrimony Gazette came through the post, advertising, prosperous rancher seeks wife, kind disposition, no fortune necessary, Clara did something she never thought herself capable of. She wrote back, and fate answered. Far to the south, in Texas Hill Country, a man named Jameson Cade leaned against the coral post of his spread. Cade Ranch. They called him a millionaire rancher, though no man in the West truly measured wealth in coin. His fortune was in land cattle and the sweat of men who drove them. He'd built it from nothing, hands blistered raw, shooting straight when outlaws tried to burn him off. By 35, he was the sort of man who filled a saloon just by walking in. Broad-shouldered, sun-scarred, with a jaw that didn't break under pressure. But Cade was tired too. Wealth didn't warm a bed at night, and whiskey only drowned loneliness for so long. So when Clara's letter arrived, written in a hand trembling between hope and fear, he read it 3 times. Then he folded it neat, tucked it into his vest pocket, and said aloud to no one, "She's mine, even if she don't know it yet." The train screeched into Abilene a month later. Steam hissed, iron clattered, and porters shouted names over the dun. Clara stood on the platform, bonnet shading her face, holding a carpet bag no bigger than a loaf of bread. Folks stared, whispering about the preacher's daughter answering some stranger's ad, calling her a mail-order bride. But Clara's jaw was set, her spine straight. She wasn't ashamed. Then the crowd parted. Jameson Cade stepped off a black stallion tall as a warhorse. Dust clung to his boots, silver glinted at his belt buckle, and his eyes locked on Clara like a hawk spotting prey. He dismounted slow, deliberate, like a man who knew the whole town was watching. "You Clara Hastings." His voice was low, gravel rolled in whiskey. "Yes, sir," she said, chin lifting. He studied her, not the way the townsfolk did, judging plain features and worn dress, but deep, like he was looking for steel beneath the skin. "And he found it?" "They call you a mail-order bride," he said, voice carrying enough for the gossips to hear. Then he stepped closer, close enough for her to smell leather, horse, and gunpowder on him. "But you hear me, Clara Hastings. Before you ever leave this town, you're mine." The platform went dead silent. A gun clicked behind them. Trouble never waited long in the Wild West. From the corner of the station, 3 men eased forward, hats low, pistols loose in their holsters. Outlaws, drifters who'd been shadowing Cade since word spread of his fortune. Their leader, a snake-eyed cuss named Virgil Kane, spat tobacco on the ground. Well, Kane drawled. "The mighty Cade, come to collect himself a wife. Ain't that sweet? Shame you won't be leaving town alive." The crowd scattered like quail. Mothers dragged children, men ducked for cover, and shopkeepers slammed shutters. Only Clara stood frozen, heart pounding like a church bell. Cade didn't move, didn't flinch. He just leaned slightly toward her, whispering, "Stay behind me, darlin'." Then he faced Kane. "Put your gun down, Virgil, you don't have the sand." The outlaw laughed, teeth yellow as corn husks. "Boys," he called, "we got ourselves $1 million rancher and his shiny new bride. Let's take what we want." The first pistol cleared leather. Cade's Colt fired first. The crack echoed off brick and timber, louder than thunder rolling across the plains. One outlaw dropped, clutching his chest. Clara gasped, covering her mouth, but Cade didn't so much as blink. His gun was already turned on the next. The standoff was born. For 3 breathless minutes, it was pistols, smoke, and fire. Cade moved like a man who'd danced with death before, firing, reloading, ducking behind a post, dragging Clara with him when bullets whined past. Virgil Kane bellowed curses, ordering his men forward, but Cade dropped them one by one with the precision of a marksman born. At last, Kane stood alone, bleeding from a graze on his shoulder, rage twisting his face. "This ain't over, Cade! You can't hide her behind money and land. A woman like that," he sneered at Clara, "isn't worth dying for." Cade's eyes turned cold. "She's worth more than you'll ever know." He fired. Kane's hat spun from his head, bullet tearing the brim. The outlaw stumbled back, white with fear, and ran into the alley. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Clara's trembling breath. Smoke drifted across the platform. Townsfolk peeked from behind barrels and doors, wide-eyed at the sight of Cade standing tall, Colt still smoking, Clara at his side. He holstered the weapon, turned to her, and tipped his hat. "Reckon we best get you home, Mrs. Cade." She blinked. "Beat, we ain't even." "We will," he said firmly, "but after today you carry my name. Safer that way." And though her cheeks burned, Clara nodded. For in that single heartbeat, beneath gun smoke and stares, something undeniable had begun. That was the day Clara Hastings stopped being a preacher's daughter and started walking the trail toward becoming the wife of Jameson Cade, rancher, millionaire, and the man who swore to call her his. But the West wasn't done with them. Not by a long shot. The Cade ranch stretched farther than Clara's eyes could follow, rolling hills dotted with oak, golden grass whispering in the wind, and herds of longhorn cattle grazing under the watch of riders on horseback. It was a kingdom built from sweat, dust, and gunpowder. Cade rode beside her in the wagon, reins loose in his strong hands, his Colt never far from reach. Clara sat rigid on the wooden seat, bonnet trembling in the breeze, heart still pounding from the gunfight at the station. "You killed 3 men," she whispered, her voice barely carrying above the creak of the wheels. Cade didn't look at her. His gaze scanned the ridgelines, the brush, the sky, as if danger could rise from anywhere. "They aimed first," he said, "and in the West, hesitation buries a man." Clara swallowed hard. She wasn't a stranger to death. Prairie fevers, childbirth, and Indian raids had taken more neighbors than she could count. But watching Cade pull the trigger, calm as a man swatting flies, unsettled her. And yet, when the smoke cleared, she had felt safe. Safer than she'd ever felt before. They reached the ranch house by sundown. It was no clapboard shack like she'd pictured. Cade's home rose 3 stories tall, built of stone hauled in from the canyon, with wide porches and windows facing the setting sun. A dozen bunkhouses dotted the yard, smoke curling from chimneys, and Cohans tipped hats as their boss rode in with his bride, to be. "Welcome to Cade Ranch," Cade said, pulling the wagon to a stop. His voice carried weight, as though every board and stone stood at attention when he spoke. Clara stepped down, skirts brushing dust, and tried to steady herself. She felt eyes on her. Dozens of rough men who'd ridden trails, fought rustlers, and spent their wages in saloons, all staring at the woman who had suddenly become mistress of Cade Ranch. An older foreman, gray-bearded and sharp-eyed, strode up. "Boss," he said, nodding. "Heard there was gunplay in town." "There was," Cade answered flatly. Virgil Kane sniffing, around again. The foreman's jaw tightened. "Thought we ran him off last spring." "So did I." Cade glanced toward Clara. "This here's Miss Clara Hastings. She'll be staying under this roof from now on. Make it known." The men tipped hats respectfully, though Clara caught the flicker of surprise in their eyes. To them, she was just another mail-order bride, a stranger. But Cade's voice left no room for doubt she was his. That night, Clara stood in the grand ranch house, staring at her reflection in a mirror framed by cedar. She barely recognized the woman looking back. Dust on her cheeks, hair tumbling loose from her bonnet, eyes wide not with fear, but with a spark she'd never seen before. The door opened behind her. Cade filled the frame, shoulders broad enough to block the light. "You'll have your own room," he said. "No expectation, until you're ready." She turned, clutching her hands. "Why me?" He frowned. "What do you mean?" "You could have any woman, one with beauty, with fortune, with breeding. Why send for me?" For the first time since she met him, Cade stepped closer, not as the iron-hard rancher, but as a man stripped bare. His voice dropped low, steady. "Because when I read your letter, I saw truth. Not lies dressed up in pretty ink. You wrote of duty, of loneliness, of wanting to belong. That's what I need, Clara, not a painted face or a fancy name. Someone who'll fight beside me, not faint when the bullets fly. Her breath caught. She remembered the station, the smoke, his arm shielding her as lead cut the air. He had already proven those words, and in that moment, something shifted. But the night wasn't quiet for long. A knock thundered on the door. The foreman barged in, hat in hand, face pale. "Boss," he said, breath ragged. "We found one of Kane's boys out by the creek." He weren't alone. Looked like near a dozen men with him. "They're riding hard, and they ain't far behind." Cade's jaw turned to stone. He reached for his gun belt, buckling it tight. "Get the men ready," he ordered. "They'll be coming for blood." The foreman nodded and bolted. Clara gripped the edge of the table. "Jameson, what does this mean?" "It means Kane don't plan to forgive what happened in Abilene. He's bringing his whole pack." Cade turned to her, eyes burning steady. "Stay inside. No matter what you hear, I'll end this." "No," Clara said sharply, surprising even herself. "I won't cower behind walls while you bleed out there. If I'm to be yours, let me prove it. Let me stand with you." For the first time, Cade allowed a flicker of a smile. "You've got fire, Clara Hastings." He stepped close, lifted her chin with a calloused hand, and kissed her. Not with hunger, but with a promise. "Then you'll stand with me." The night erupted in gunfire. Kane's gang rode in like wolves, rifles flashing under the moon, hooves pounding like war drums. Cade's cowhands fired from fences and windows, returning lead with steel nerves. Clara, hands shaking, loaded rifles in the house, passing them to riders as they stormed in for more ammunition. The ranch yard became a battlefield, men shouting, horses screaming, the stench of black powder thick as fog. Clara's heart thundered, yet she didn't falter. Every bullet she loaded meant another man lived, and at the center of it all rode Jameson Cade, his silhouette a force of legend, Colt blazing, rifle cracking, his voice carrying commands above the chaos. Virgil Kane charged through the smoke, pistol raised, eyes wild. "Cade," he roared. "This ends tonight." Cade met him head on. The two men fired at once, bullets ripping the air. Clara screamed his name. Silence fell like a hammer. When the smoke cleared, Virgil Kane lay sprawled in the dust, a hole in his chest. Cade staggered, blood soaking his sleeve, but still standing tall. His men whooped, driving the rest of the gang into the dark. Clara ran to him, catching his weight as he nearly fell. "You're hurt." He looked down at her, eyes fierce but soft. "A scratch. I've had worse." Then, despite the blood, despite the pain, his lips curved into a slow smile. "You stood with me, darlin', just like you promised." Clara pressed her forehead to his chest, tears mixing with dust and blood. For the first time, she felt the truth in his words, the truth she doubted. She wasn't just a mail-order bride. She was his. And together they had faced the West and won. That night, as the ranch settled under a sky spangled with stars, Cade whispered into her hair, "You'll carry my name, Clara Cade. From this day forward, this land, this fight, this life, it's ours." And she believed him. For in the heart of the Wild West, where fortunes rose and blood stained the dust, two souls had found each other. Not by chance, not by fortune, but by fire. And nothing, no outlaw, no gun, no whispering town, would tear them apart.